For 12,000 years, a hidden force shaped the destiny of empires. From China to Rome, they weren't kings in stone castles. They were the ghost riders of the endless plains, the nomads of the Eurasian steppe. And their story is more incredible and more important than you were ever taught in school. This is the tale of how a sea of grass created the modern world. Let's travel back in time, not to grand cities, but to a vast, windswept land stretching thousands of miles. This is the Eurasian steppe. Here, survival wasn't about building walls. It was about constant movement. Early humans, driven by the rhythm of the seasons, followed massive herds of wild animals. They were hunters, ghosts on the landscape, their lives tied to the pulse of the wild. But around 10,000 years ago, something changed. They didn't just hunt the horse, they tamed it. This single act was like igniting a rocket. Suddenly, the vast, unforgiving steppe wasn't an obstacle. It was a highway. Humanity had just gained a superpower: speed. With the horse came a new way of life. These weren't just hunters anymore. They were herders, masters of animals. They lived in portable homes called yurts, which could be packed up and moved in hours. Their wealth wasn't gold. It was cattle, sheep, and, most importantly, horses. This was the dawn of pastoral nomadism. Their society was built for mobility. Every object they owned had to be light and durable. Their art was intricate but small golden buckles, decorated daggers, and elaborate horse bridles. They lived and died on horseback, becoming the most skilled cavalry the world had ever seen. The steppe became a crucible, forging a new kind of human. Tough, resilient, and always on the move. They weren't barbarians. They were innovators who had perfected life in one of the planet's harshest environments. They left behind no great cities of their own, but their graves tell a story of power and belief. We call them kurgans, massive burial mounds dotting the plains. Archaeologists digging into these kurgans have found incredible treasures. In the frozen soil of Siberia, they discovered the Pazyryk burials. Here, bodies were so well preserved by the ice that their intricate tattoos are still visible after 2,000 years. They were buried with sacrificed horses, decked out in fantastic gear, ready to ride into the afterlife. These finds revealed a complex spiritual world, a reverence for ancestors, and a belief that a warrior's journey didn't end with death. These tombs are like time capsules, showing us a culture as rich and sophisticated as any settled civilization. And they hint at the power these nomadic chieftains held. But the nomads didn't live in a bubble. Their constant movement brought them into contact with the great settled empires on the edges of the steppe: China, Persia, and the civilizations of the Middle East. At first, this was about trade. The nomads had what the cities wanted: horses, leather, and furs. The cities had what the nomads needed: grain, textiles, and metalwork. This exchange created one of the most important trade routes in history: the Silk Road. But the Silk Road wasn't just a peaceful highway for merchants. It was a conduit for ideas, technologies, religions, and conflict, all facilitated and often controlled by the nomads who patrolled it. These interactions were a delicate dance between peace and war. When times were good, trade flourished. But when climate change brought drought and famine to the steppe, or when a powerful leader united the tribes, the nomads became an unstoppable military force. Their entire way of life was a training ground for war. Every man was a warrior, a master archer on horseback. Their tactic was simple but terrifyingly effective: a swirling storm of horsemen, firing arrows with deadly accuracy, pretending to retreat, then turning to annihilate their pursuers. They were the masters of psychological warfare. For the foot soldiers of settled empires, facing a nomadic army was like trying to fight a hurricane. If you're enjoying this, make sure to subscribe for more hidden history. Now let's talk about the first great nomadic empire that sent shockwaves across the ancient world. Meet the Scythians. Around the 7th century BC, these fierce horse warriors dominated the western steppe, from the Black Sea to Central Asia. The ancient Greek historian Herodotus wrote about them with a mix of fear and fascination. He described their brutal customs, like drinking from the skulls of their enemies, but also their unbreakable loyalty and martial prowess. The Scythians were masters of goldwork, creating stunningly beautiful objects depicting scenes of combat and animal life. They weren't just raiders. They built a powerful confederation that challenged the Persian Empire itself. When the mighty Persian king Darius the Great invaded their lands, he expected a conventional battle. Instead, the Scythians just melted away into the vast plains, scorching the earth, poisoning wells, and luring the massive Persian army deeper and deeper into a wasteland until it nearly starved. The Scythians taught the world a lesson. You cannot conquer a people who have no cities to burn. Centuries later, on the eastern end of the steppe, a new power rose: the Xiongnu. Their constant raids on the northern frontier of China became such a threat that they inspired one of the greatest engineering projects in human history, the Great Wall of China. The wall wasn't just a barrier, it was a statement. It was the settled world's attempt to draw a line in the sand, to separate their world of farms and cities from the wild, unpredictable world of the steppe. But the Xiongnu couldn't be contained. They formed a massive and highly organized empire, a true rival to China's Han Dynasty. They forced the Chinese emperors to pay them tribute, silk, grain, and even princesses in exchange for peace. The Xiongnu proved that nomads could build and sustain a political structure as complex as any kingdom. The steppe was a dynamic place. Empires rose and fell. The Xiongnu were eventually defeated and splintered. One group of these defeated nomads began a westward migration that would change the face of Europe forever. After traveling for generations across the vast expanse of Asia, they burst into the Roman world in the 4th century AD. The Romans called them the Huns. Led by their legendary leader Attila, the Huns became the terror of Europe. Their arrival triggered a massive chain reaction known as the Migration Period, as terrified Gothic tribes fled before them, pouring across the Roman frontiers and destabilizing the Western Roman Empire. Attila, the scourge of God, built an empire stretching from Germany to the Ural River. He didn't conquer and hold cities in the traditional sense. He extorted them, creating a massive protection racket that bled the Roman Empire dry. The Huns showed the ultimate power of nomadic warfare, the ability not just to raid, but to break entire civilizations. After the Huns, a succession of Turkic peoples came to dominate the steppe. They built a series of great empires, or khaganates, that controlled the Silk Road and connected east and west. They were not just warriors. They were sophisticated diplomats and traders. They introduced new technologies and spread their language across Central Asia. And then, in the 13th century, came the ultimate nomadic conqueror. A man who united the Mongol tribes and unleashed them upon the world: Genghis Khan. The Mongol Empire is the most famous and most misunderstood chapter in the story of the nomads. In just a few decades, Genghis Khan and his successors created the largest contiguous land empire in the history of the world. It stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the heart of Europe. Their conquests were brutal, resulting in the deaths of millions. But what came after the conquest is often overlooked. The Pax Mongolica, or Mongol Peace, secured the Silk Road like never before. For the first time, a merchant could travel safely from Europe to China. This unleashed an unprecedented wave of trade and exchange. Gunpowder, the compass, and printing technology moved west. Marco Polo traveled east. But so did the Black Death, carried along the same trade routes, a devastating reminder of how connected the world had become. The Mongols were both destroyers and connectors, the final and most powerful expression of steppe power. So, why did the age of the nomadic empires end? It wasn't another group of warriors that defeated them. It was technology. The rise of gunpowder weapons, particularly cannons, changed the rules of warfare. Stone walls, once vulnerable to siege, could now be defended by artillery. A trained infantryman with a firearm could now defeat a master horse archer. The advantage shifted decisively back to the settled states. Empires like Russia and China began to expand into the steppe, no longer just defending against it, but actively colonizing it. They built forts, established farms, and slowly but surely the sea of grass was tamed. The nomadic way of life, which had dominated the heart of Eurasia for millennia, was pushed to the margins. But the legacy of the nomads is all around us. Their migrations shaped the genetic map of the world. Their military tactics were studied for centuries. They controlled the trade routes that connected civilizations. They were the catalyst, the chaotic force that prevented the world's great empires from becoming stagnant. They were the storm that swept across the plains, tearing down the old and unintentionally creating the new. The story of civilization is often told as a story of cities and kings, but that's only half the picture. The other half was written on the wind by the hoofbeats of the ghost riders of the steppe. Subscribe to uncover more stories history tried to hide.